For 150 million years, this was their planet. Dinosaurs were the undisputed masters of Earth, spread across every single continent. They were powerful, they were diverse, and then, in what amounts to a geological blink of an eye, they vanished. We all think we know the story. A colossal asteroid the size of a mountain screams through the atmosphere and slams into the planet. That's the image, right? A single, catastrophic day that ended the age of dinosaurs. But here's the thing, that asteroid wasn't a lone gunman. The dinosaurs were already living on a planet that was, frankly, trying to kill them. The asteroid was just the final shove off a cliff they were already teetering on. Their extinction wasn't a simple assassination. It was a murder mystery with multiple suspects. A perfect storm of planet-altering disasters. So, what really killed the dinosaurs? It wasn't just one thing, it was 5. Reason 1: a planet in turmoil. Long before the killer from space showed up, the dinosaurs' world was already going downhill. For millions of years, the planet had been going through a gradual but persistent phase of global cooling. The balmy, stable temperatures they had thrived in were starting to drop, putting a huge strain on their ecosystems. Now, this is where paleontologists don't quite agree. Some look at the fossil record and see clear evidence that dinosaur diversity was already tanking for up to 10 million years before the end. In this version of the story, big herbivores, like the Triceratops and the duck-billed dinosaurs, were disappearing. A less diverse ecosystem is a fragile one. Fewer plant eaters means the whole food chain gets wobbly, eventually leading to a drop in the carnivores that hunt them. It's a cascade effect. But other, more recent research argues that we might be getting fooled by gaps in the fossil record. These studies suggest that most dinosaur groups were doing just fine, maybe even thriving, right up until the final blow. Whether they were in a slow decline or not, one thing is certain: the world was changing. Continents were drifting, sea levels were all over the place, and the stage was being set for something much, much bigger. The dinosaurs' world was under stress, and that made them vulnerable. Reason to the Earth's fever. While the climate was slowly chilling, something way more violent was brewing deep underground. In modern-day India, one of the most massive volcanic events in Earth's history kicked off. This wasn't just one volcano. It was a gigantic volcanic plain known as the Deccan Traps. For tens of thousands of years, these things spewed out an almost unbelievable amount of lava and gas, enough to bury an area the size of France, more than a mile deep in some places. The immediate damage was local, but the long-term, global impact was insane. These volcanoes pumped trillions of tons of junk into the atmosphere. First, sulfur dioxide blocked out the sun, triggering a brief but nasty volcanic winter. But that was followed by a flood of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that trapped heat and sent the planet into a long-term, runaway global warming. Earth was stuck in a chaotic cycle of wild temperature swings. Acid rain likely poisoned rivers, lakes, and soil. For a long time, many scientists figured this was the real killer, that the volcanoes slowly suffocated the planet's ecosystems. But the latest thinking suggests the worst of the Deccan Traps pollution had probably cleared up thousands of years before the extinction. The climate seems to have stabilized, so while the volcanoes probably couldn't have wiped out the dinosaurs on their own, they absolutely weakened the planet's life support systems. They poisoned the air, messed with the climate, and shoved already stressed ecosystems even closer to the edge. It's pretty clear. The end of the dinosaurs is way more complicated than we used to think. We're piecing this apocalyptic puzzle together with some incredible science, from drilling into the impact crater itself to modeling Earth's ancient climate on supercomputers. If you think this stuff is as cool as we do, make sure you subscribe. We've got a lot more of history's great mysteries to uncover. Alright, now back to the apocalypse. Reason 3. The killer from space, 66 million years ago. After all that simmering climate change and volcanic fury, the final blow arrived. It came from space. An asteroid, maybe a piece of a comet, somewhere between 10 and 15 kilometers wide, came screaming toward Earth. It was moving so fast, its trip through our atmosphere took only a few seconds, and it just so happened to strike a shallow sea in the worst possible place. Mexico's peninsula. The impact unleashed the energy of billions of Hiroshima-sized bombs. Instantly, the asteroid and a huge chunk of the Earth's crust were vaporized, blasting a crater over 150 kilometers wide and, initially, 20 kilometers deep. The blast wave would have flattened everything for thousands of kilometers. Planet-shattering earthquakes would have rocked the globe. Trillions of tons of molten rock and debris were launched into, and even above, the atmosphere. As this superheated material rained back down, it cooked the air to oven-like temperatures, sparking global wildfires that torched entire forests. For any dinosaur in the blast's vicinity, death was instant. But for the rest of the planet, this was just the beginning. Reason 4. The immediate fallout. The asteroid didn't just punch a hole in the planet. It shattered the climate system. The impact vaporized the sulfur-rich rock on the seafloor, blasting it high into the stratosphere, along with immense amounts of dust and soot from those global fires. This thick shroud of debris wrapped around the entire planet, blocking out the sun. The result was an impact winter. Without sunlight, global temperatures plunged by as much as 28 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The world was thrown into a deep, freezing darkness that could have lasted for years. Photosynthesis, the process that powers almost all life on Earth, slammed to a halt. On land and in the sea, plants and plankton withered and died. The collapse of the food web was fast and unforgiving. Herbivorous dinosaurs that survived the initial blast now faced a dark, frozen world with nothing to eat. They starved, and once they were gone, the mighty carnivores, like Tyrannosaurus rex, were next. The oceans weren't safe either. That vaporized sulfur fell back as acid rain, turning the surface of the oceans acidic and wiping out countless marine species, including the giant mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. It's estimated that 75% of all species on Earth were annihilated. The discovery of asteroid dust inside the Chicxulub crater has provided what many call the smoking gun. The asteroid was the trigger, and it created a hell on Earth that very few things could survive. Reason 5. The final domino. The asteroid was the trigger. The impact winter was the weapon. But the final nail in the coffin was the complete and total collapse of their ecosystem. The world that eventually emerged from the dark and the cold was a different planet. The complex food webs that had supported life for millions of years were gone. Even if a few small groups of dinosaurs had somehow survived the first few years of starvation, they would have found their world was gone. The lush forests they needed for food and shelter were replaced by fields of ferns, a strange phenomenon paleontologists call the fern spike, which signals a landscape recovering from absolute devastation. The survivors were the small and adaptable. Our own ancestors, the early mammals, were mostly tiny, burrowing creatures. They could hide from the worst of it and get by on insects, roots, and whatever else they could find. With the giant dinosaurs gone, these mammals found a world full of opportunity, suddenly free from the predators that had kept them in the shadows for years. The extinction of the dinosaurs wasn't one event. It was a chain reaction. It was a perfect storm. A planet already stressed by climate change and volcanism, hit by an asteroid in the worst possible way, which triggered an impact winter leading to a global collapse of the food chain that wiped out 75% of life. The creatures that made it were small, versatile, and very, very lucky. Conclusion. So, what killed the dinosaurs? It wasn't just the asteroid. It was a conspiracy of forces. A slow-burning climate change that made life harder. Apocalyptic volcanoes that poisoned the skies. And then, the final, brutal shot from space that triggered a planetary deep freeze and a total ecosystem crash. It was the combination of these 5 punches that sealed their fate. The story of their end is a sobering reminder of how fragile life on this planet can be. But it's also a story of opportunity. Their death cleared the stage for something new. In the wake of that global catastrophe, our mammalian ancestors began their own rise. A story that eventually leads to us looking back and piecing together the incredible, terrifying story of how the age of dinosaurs came to an end.